I'm just going to quickly introduce the subject today. Today is Grow Your Exports and Business in the USA. Happily, I can say that IBT Partners, we have a lot of experience in that. I'll come to that in a second. And today we're going to be focusing on online, e-commerce opportunities and case studies, but it's all about a special focus on the American Midwest. And actually, as Michael was saying, I've just come back actually from Texas. Either you can call that in the South, or it is actually part of the Midwest, that big band of important states in the center of the US, a magnet for UK B2B exporters and a center for US trade. I can certainly say I met a lot of UK companies at the convention in Dallas as well. Some UK companies that were there. Okay, can we turn over the next slide? And I'm just going to say a quick word on IBT Partners. IBT Partners, who are we? We're a team of experienced and professional web-savvy business developers. So we have offices in the US. Actually, our offices in the US are in Chicago. That's the Midwest, the capital of the Midwest, according to some. In the United Kingdom, Germany, and France. What do we do? It's International Business and Trade. That's what IBT stands for. And we do that through the application of online technologies. It's all about the web. It's how to use grow your business internationally. And today we're all focused on the web. So thank you and welcome to all exporters. Our clients are American and European companies and also state economic development agencies. We work with a lot of state economic development agencies in Europe, but also in the US. Actually, we're very proud to serve 12 US states, including a number of US states in the Midwest that we can come to later. So that's a quick intro to IBT Partners. And the topic of the day, as we said, I think now is the moment that I hand back to Susanna, or we move on to the next slide, please.
Okay, but before we hand over, how about celebrating us a little bit?
Yes, I'm proud of this, actually, and of course Bill. Bill, there's a picture of Bill. Bill is on the left there. Managing director, actually they call him president over there in the US. So Bill Patterson, we won Best Innovative Company Award. So that was handed out by the British Consul General in Chicago in May of this year. We won first prize for the innovative web-based tools, and notably for our particular product and service called Countryspecific Websites and Marketing. And so we are proud members of the British American Business Council. If you're not aware of what BAB is, I do recommend having a look at it. Check out its website, babinc.org. It's a unification of chambers of commerce in the United Kingdom with those in the US, and it is really helpful to help you in business, growing your business in the US. Susanna.
Thank you very much. So getting straight on to our webinar, a couple of very small little housekeeping issues before we start. Michael already mentioned some. I think most importantly as well, you will all get a copy of the slide deck, so you don't have to take any notes or anything like that. You'll get it, through. We'll send it to you by email, and then you can, so just, relax, sit back. This is supposed to be also a discussion, so send in questions via the chat box anytime. And we'll try and answer them at the end. We're going to try and keep this short, concise, sweet, all that. And as I said here, we're going to talk about the United States, then building local websites and country-specific websites in the Midwest in particular. That's our agenda for the day, and then those housekeeping issues. So getting right started. I think that's what we really wanted to
in fact,
point
Susanna, could I just jump in? Actually, just before we get going, I'd like to run a quick poll.
Good idea. Very good idea.
One of the things we're going to do is we're going to run polls. There are going to be 4 polls today. We hope that you'll enjoy them. We thought that we would just run a quick poll at the end of the 4th slide with the agenda, which is, first of all, I'm going to launch it now. It gives you an opportunity to participate. Please do. Here you go. It's launching. And the question, are you exporting to the US? So please do tick. So are you currently exporting to the US? Please says yes, no, or are you intending to within the next 6 months? So I see 50% are already doing that. 33% they say they're going to within 6 months, and the smallest category we have is 70% say no. So without more ado, I'll stop the poll. I've cancelled the poll, and I thank you very much indeed. And Susanna, back over to you.
Thank you very much. So I think our first slide, we just really wanted to say that, I mean, as John was saying earlier, we're doing things like export assistance and helping companies get more traction in their export markets, particularly like the United States. And this sort of moment of, an in-market, country-specific, which really ticks a lot of exporter boxes in terms of the visibility, credibility, and accessibility, which are the three sort of major ingredients that all exporters need in their target markets. So we really feel that the in-market websites would be a fantastic tool. So there we go. Now, the first things we wanted also to point out was that there's a couple of myths. I'm sure all of you already know these already, but let's just go through them. The first is that Google in the United States is very different from Google in the UK. So your google.co.uk is very different from if you had something called a google.com, for example. The second thing, and this is following on from that, is search engine optimization country specific. That's very obvious if you have a different language. If you're, a Spanish website is going to have a very different search engine optimization because it's in Spanish. But the same is true in the United States, even if it's so-called English. The English is not the same English. Then the third mythbuster that I really wanted to also point out was that social media must be part of any marketing strategy today. It is just something non-negotiable. You have to be in there with social media these days. So there we go. There's a couple of things I just wanted to put out there at the beginning of the presentation, just to have you, just to get on the same page there for that. Now, in terms of the United, obviously, we Brits, you Brits, have this U.S. special relationship, goes back to Boston Tea Parties and things. Now, but it really holds for the whole of Europe as well, since the two, Europe and USA, are each other's largest trade partners for this. But I really wanted to point out, and again, you're going to get all these numbers in the slide deck that we hand to you, but I really wanted to point out as well, just in terms of numbers, how many existing links there are already. 41,000 companies in the United Kingdom depend upon U.S. exporting. There are over 9,000 U.S. companies listed in London alone. And the other really important one that I want to point out is that the U.S., just as the UK is an aircraft carrier for Europe, the U.S. should be a carrier for you into Canada and the Latin American markets and South American markets as well. By the way, there's lots of downloads from our website that you could download for free, like the Exporter's Guide to the United States. These are like, web books and e-books and things that you can download. So,
Susanna, could I jump in and propose
another
poll? This one is on something called the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. I'm not too sure if you're all up to speed on what some people call TTIP or TTIP, TTIP. So I'm going to launch the poll now, and while the poll is being launched, there you go, there you have it. The poll is, do you know or do you not know about TTIP? Do you think TTIP would be good for your business, not good for your business? 50% say that they don't know about TTIP, 75% don't know about TTIP, 60% now don't know. Right, TTIP. Do go and have a look at it. It's actually very important. Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. It's an agreement between the US and the EU, the European Union, in terms of everything that is related to trade and, of course, investment. It should make business easier for you in the US. It is proposed that its negotiations are completed in 2016, so next year. 38% say that it's going to think that it's going to be good for your business. Certainly about business, and we would encourage you to understand a little bit more about TTIP. It should be good. That's what it's supposed to be. I'm going to close the poll now, and I thank you very much. Susanna.
Thank you, John, and I'll hope I remember the cues for the polls next time, but thank you for jumping in there. So United States, just as a one slide, just overview in terms of online, it's incredibly receptive and an ideal market for looking at it as an exporter to go online. Large, prosperous, easy to do business, and very much an early adopter. What's also really important for us small and medium-sized industries is that they are really good payers. In other words, they pay in a very short time, which for e-commerce customers. However, there's a lot of expectations customers will have, and they have a short attention span. You get it wrong once, they won't come back. And I also wanted just to highlight some of the major, I'd say, difficulties, challenges, things that you're going to have to be aware of if you're going into the United States and through a country-specific website. The first is that there's a lot of differences by the state, by the region, online, offline. So there are even different taxes, state taxes, country-specific, state-specific taxes, federal taxes, and online taxes. So be careful on that. And payment systems are very different. Again, well, I'll give a couple of examples later on in the presentation. A little snapshot then of also about the Midwest in particular. It's that area on the map that's all sort of it includes, it's really the what's called the industrial heartland, but also the agricultural heartland of the United States. It's those huge flat cornfields and Detroit megacities on the other side. So the cradle of heavy machinery, and at the same time that agricultural and agribusiness side. If you were to look in terms of the GDP of the Midwest, and this is after the 2008 crunch, and arguably the Midwest was the hardest hit from the last recession. The Midwest is roughly $4 trillion, which is about a quarter of the U.S. GDP. That's equivalent to Germany, or actually pretty well equivalent to Japan. So it's it is a very central market. So I think that's one of the points we wanted to raise here. Concentrate about the East, they concentrate on the Pacific coast area in California. The Midwest has got a lot to offer too. I also wanted then to drill down a bit more into the Midwest. There's a couple of points here. First of all, as I said, in terms of GDP, the Midwest itself is $4 billion. But if you include what it touches around, so it's sort of direct sphere of influence, that's Ontario, Northern New York, the state of Pennsylvania, and so on, you're quickly looking at something more like 5 to 6 billion, that should be trillion, sorry about that, dollars. So really, really very substantial in the economy. I also wanted to point out that the Midwest is home to 140 of the U.S. top companies. Obviously, we all think of the Midwest as sort of the car industry, but it's also agribiz, pharma, and retail. Those are the four key business areas of the Midwest. And typically, clients of ours who are interested in the Midwest are interested in a B2B route to market, and they're interested in connecting to original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, through their websites. Looking at a lot of the people who were looking at joining, we did notice that quite a few of you look to be much more sort of reliant on distributors or reliant on B2C. So I have expanded our or modified the webinar a little bit to talk about e-commerce in general and not just B2B and not just OEMs for that. So we'll get on to those in a second. And here we have an example of that in terms of if you are interested in the e-commerce. Again, the Midwest, we think, is one of the key areas that you want to look at if you're thinking about setting up an e-commerce hub, for example. The Midwest is probably one of your key areas that you want to look at. Not only hardware in place, but the logistics center is also in place. So the Midwest has hardware in terms of telecom, internet, and so on of North America, which is absolutely key for you. And secondly, it has this huge logistics hub, the sort of Chicago, Joliet area, sort of its triangle between Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin area for anything that's in stockists and distributors. So again, when you are looking on any kind of business model, if you're thinking about setting up in terms of the United States for e-commerce, that could be one of the key arguments that you would have. I think I've gone the wrong way. Sorry about that. Here we go. I wanted also to put out just a couple of major trends in the United States at the moment, and these are the same trends that you're going to find in Europe. E-commerce and M-commerce, very fast growing. Now, you might think of e-commerce as only B2C. The largest e-commerce by far is B2B, so business-to-business e-commerce. And in the United States, it's worth over $520 billion. M-commerce, I'm not sure how much you're aware of M-commerce these days. You should all be very much M-commerce and M-focused. M stands for mobility. At the moment, 29% of U.S. consumers purchase online. Just to give you an example, that doubled in the last 3 years. In Europe, it's growing just as fast, and I've put in the amount there. It's doubled in Europe as well in the last 2 years. So just to let you know, that is part of e-commerce today, is the m-commerce side. Google made it part of their ranking algorithm. Yes. Do you want another poll?
Okay, pardon me. No, absolutely. Go for the Google ranking algorithms, and then I'd love to propose another poll.
I was just going to say that Google have made it part of their algorithm for SEO as of this year, so that if you have a website, if you don't have it mobile enhanced and mobile enabled, you are penalizing yourself in terms of Google ranking. John, your poll.
All right, thank you. Yes, indeed, and it's true. I mean, we talked a lot about that in the week, actually. A lot of people were talking about e-commerce and the growth of M. Everybody over there is very, very focused on that. I've got a poll for you, and please, this one, I'm launching it now, so you should be able to see it, is do you use e-commerce to sell your goods and services? So we've got a lot of attendees from across the country today, so I'm very excited to know what you're thinking in terms of do you use e-commerce? Do you use e-commerce in your home market? Do you use e-commerce internationally? How about in the USA? Are you on e-commerce in the USA today? And if not, why not? And what about do you intend to do so within 6 months? So I can give you some stats here. 14% say in their home market, and 43% are doing so internationally, 4% in the USA, and 30% that say they do not intend to do so with. Those are some interesting numbers. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll be sharing this with you. As Susanna said earlier, I'm going to close that poll now. Susanna, then back to you.
Thank you very much, John. Right, this is similar, just the sort of the latest on the hot trends. E-commerce and what's called cross-border, and that's very important as well. If you're targeting the United States, you also should be looking at Canada as a cross-border sale. Canadians will be accessing your site if it's well positioned, and you should be ready and to take advantage of that. Not always the biggest market, but there you go. It's a growing market. So cross-border e-commerce is growing very fast. Differences between the UK and the United States in terms of marketplaces. Amazon and eBay heading up the list, but after that in the United States, there are things called Bonanza, Etsy, Craigslist, which are very well regarded and have a very widespread search throughout the US. And equally, in terms of payers and how e-shoppers pay, there are some significant differences. Americans still pay by check. And remember, their credit cards are very different from our credit cards. They don't really always have encrypted. They're much less secure. They don't a chip on them. There is a enmity towards or growing dissatisfaction with PayPal and its dominance within eBay. So PayPal's market share is actually going down in the United States. All of this is important to research and just to make sure that you have all the facilities ready for your clients when they're going on board, whether they're companies or consumers. If a U.S. consumer or company does not have ease of payment, they will leave your site very quickly. So now in the second half of our webinar, we really want to focus on the pragmatic side, which is how to build your site and how to use your site. And I think our key message here is if you have a website, please use your website. No use having a Ferrari and parking it in the garage, as they say. So, you know, if your website, integrate right from the very beginning that you have a marketing budget and that your website on a daily basis to push out and get leads and generate business for that. So the first point we would make about building a local website, a country-specific website, is to make sure you own your domain names and that you really own them, that you control them. Do not hand them over to distributors, third parties, affiliates, partners, whatever it is. Make sure that you own them. These are your brands. This is your loyalty. This is your image. And I just wanted to share with you this little example of one. It's starwars.co.uk, which looked like a fantastic website, domain name to own. And for the last 12 years, it has been owned by a little company in, I think it's, who sells masquerade parties, costumes for parties. And then, of course, Disney came out with the Star Wars, the revival films, and they have spent a fortune buying that website back from starwars.co.uk. So that store is now has now relinquished that website and has actually been paid a lot of money by Disney. So, you know, make sure that you own your important URLs. If you have a .co.uk, make sure you have a .com as well. Now, the next point we want to make is just to have, you know, the market credibility. And here, it's important to have that look and feel of the local market. Still maintained, but just look and feel. And here, you know, this is a very country-specific design with you know, the London cabs and so on. And as you know, Cadbury's was bought by an American company 5 years ago. So it's actually an American company now, but for us Brits, it looks totally English. And there's another example I wanted to give you here, which was about credibility. On the left, you have Jaguar UK, and there's a little picture of James Bond there. It looks like it's all mean business. And on the right-hand side, you have Jaguar United States, which is all about service, which the Americans pride above all else in terms of So yeah, you know, you can see Jaguar taking a very specific feel. It's still the same company, still the same brand, the look and feel. You know, the basic architecture of the site is the same, but there's just a little tweaking going on, and sort of localizing your content. We have an example as well. For example, one of our companies that we work with is a truck company, and you know, they don't do trucks in the UK; they do lorries, and their lorries in the UK look quite different from the lorries they use in the United States. Again, that's just an easy fix, an easy win, and it makes your website so much better in the United States. You know, translation is obviously a key. That's a localization with an S or a Z for the United States. So any kind of translation also, and fixing for the United States. Also look at dates, vocabulary, units of measurements, you know, case studies. Remember, you know, the Americans put the month before the day. Simple things like that. Then make sure that your website is really well performing for the United States. And a last little tip I would say about that local credibility is you have to understand from the very beginning that your website, your e-commerce, your B2B strategy is absolutely 100% up to date and compliant with all rules and regulations, both with the internet and with applications as well. So then using sites, and here I just want to say, you know, the importance of Google. In Google has about a 2/3 market share in the United States. That's very different from in Europe, where they have more like a 90% market share. Nonetheless, if Google likes you in the United States, you're basically be liked by the other ones, particularly Bing and Yahoo. So, you know, make sure that Google is liking you in that sense. And there are just two basic key ingredients for Google. You know, be local and be active. So that's really a major thing. There's a lot of tips you can use. There's a lot of help you can get about making sure that your website is very active to Google. And if you want, we have a whole list of them on our website. You can downloads about optimizing your websites for European search engines, and that should also say US search engines. But for example, just one tip is use lots of videos. Google really likes videos, and they're a great way of getting over messages quickly. So country-specific websites and country-specific website search engine optimization. So here the importance is, again, the difference between google.co.uk and google.com, and that they have different search engine optimizations. John, do you want to do a poll now? Is this a moment for a poll, or should we do that a bit later?
No, I certainly can. Absolutely. I was wondering whether to jump in when we would like to do that. I do have one more plus poll for today, and I'm going to launch it in a second, and it's all country-specific websites in terms of the UK and the US. So knowing how many, shall we say, companies have large markets, large client base, and large potential in the US and, of course, in the UK, they have websites dedicated for each market. So all about URLs. Do you have dedicated URLs, .com, .co.uk? Do you actually look at the multilingual issues of Spanish? Spanish is very important across the US. Is your search engine optimized for each market, all of the keywords? And do you do social media adapted for each market? Time zones. Be aware, across the US, you have Eastern Time, Central Time, Pacific Time, measurements, dollars, currencies, etc., etc. So 67%, 70% say they've got URLs nailed, 30% that they're onto languages, 60% that they have got SEO nailed, and well done them. Social media is in at 50%, and 40% say they've addressed the time zone, measurements, currency issue. That's actually very good. Thank you very much. Well done. Well done. We have figures from other surveys that have been conducted, and they're a lot less advanced than you all are. So I say congratulations. And with that, I'm going to close this poll and say, Susanna, over to you again.
Just a couple of major tips that we have. We found in the past that the single biggest booster to SEO is quality content, without a doubt. We also find that hosting locally really helps in terms of speed upload, and in terms of getting spreading out the word, engage with local directories and forums, because it really increases the nexus and increases those access points that you want for a website. So social media in the United States. 60% of the population, 2/3 of the population are using social media very regularly. It's obviously in terms of B2B, it's LinkedIn, Facebook, and the Americans use Facebook differently, I find, than Europeans and the UK. Companies in the United States are expected to have a Facebook page which is not just about the Christmas party and the summer picnic. It's also about testimonials, about visits to clients, and so on. So it is not just a social calendar. Facebook acts as a direct B2B venue as well in the United States. So worth having a think about when you're looking at your Facebook pages for your companies. We're often asked, when's the perfect moment to start? We would say, whenever you can. But very often events start, we find by coincidence, they start shortly, let's say 3, 4, 5 months ahead of some major trade show or a major trade event. So it's worth doing, and when I say 40% more leads, that's basically from our judgments. Okay, this is looking at customers that we've helped, where we've said, okay, what did you get last year in terms of your leads? By getting them a country-specific website and really marketing that website hard before the event, we've definitely seen a sort of more or less 40% increase in their leads for trade shows. And again, a couple of optimizer tips on that. We would definitely say, on your website, that's a good one. And for the
It also means that it declares you as the industry expert and as the expert in that trade show. It helps also you maintain some kind of link and connection with any leads that you get in the trade shows. So worthwhile having as part of your marketing strategy is if you do engage in trade events like trade shows. And that's a perfect example of using country-specific websites. One of the reasons we like doing that as well is that we're able to judge the return on investment. And return on investment is one of the key areas that you have to integrate into your website planning right from the beginning. There's a lot of different tools you could use to measure how well your website, Exporter website is. We use all of those ones. They work. They have different aspects to them. You know, like Moz, for example, is really good about search results and social media, but doesn't help you in terms of leads, that sort of thing. So we'll cross-reference with lots of different tools to make sure that the websites are working well, and that's worth having. And how do you work out your return on investment? It's not hard. The first thing you need to do is make sure you really define the objectives that you have for your business model. And then really just put them in place and measure them after each major event. So you put out a blog, measure its impact, tweak it a little bit, and if it works, continue. So it's really a fast turn and a fast trial and error, which works on the websites. So that's sort of a very quick rundown of some of the things that we thought would be of interest in terms of highlighting for you in terms of the United States, the Midwest, and country-specific websites. Really just, from our view, it should be an exporter's best friend, just allowing you to sort of organize your sales and generating your leads by allowing you to have that visibility, credibility, and accessibility into your markets. I wanted to highlight as well that this is series of webinars. These ones go from the very general to very specific ones. For example, more specific is in January we're having a series about e-commerce and VAT. There's some major changes happening in the VAT, and which will affect anyone working in the European markets. And then also about the United States, again, in the West Coast, and in January, a general view of the West of the U.S. With the British American business and how they can bring you some help too. So with that, John, I've slightly exceeded my time, but I don't have time left for questions.